Today is Monday, October 24th. This is a meeting of the Transportation Committee. For those of you who might be here for our transportation roundtable discussion, we're going to take care of a quick committee meeting first, and then we'll move on to our transit-oriented development discussion. So, first order of business today for the Transportation Committee is consideration of the minutes from the October 10th meeting.
I move we approve the October 10th meeting minutes.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. All right, next up, a very much anticipated conversation. Going to talk about potential expansion of the Birmingham on-demand system, and Christina Argo is going to be speaking to us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Christina Argo with the Department of Transportation. So yes, much anticipated. Everybody's excited to see this, I know. So I'm going to go through the overview of how we got to where we got to for the extension plan, and there's some detailed demographics and some other things that you guys can review, and then we'll get into the maps, which is probably the most exciting part, and to kind of see where we're going. So here's a quick overview. The expansion of the service of Birmingham On Demand should be directly tied into the city's public transportation system. Microtransit is a complement to our fixed route bus service. And so expansion in all directions from our current city center zone is a lot to do at once within our current budget, and we really don't want to run the risk of spreading the service too thin. So because our service is already weighted heavily towards the west side and includes the West Transit Station, it's logical to look at tying in to the Birmingham Express on the east side, especially to the East Transit Center in Woodlawn. So if we think about the cost of the expansion, it's our goal to use our remaining budget for this fiscal year. And a few reasons why we think we can do that is we've been expecting this expansion, so we've asked VIA to manage towards our fiscal budget. BJCTA is going to begin their nighttime VIA service at 7 p.m. in the next month. And so currently we operate our service till 8, so that will give us 1 hour in the evenings that we can reallocate, 1 hour service in the evenings that we can reallocate to this expansion. Currently, we've pulled 2 vans from the downtown service, and we're going to be closely monitoring how this affects wait times and just demand overall. There's several other things we can look at too as far as managing our budget and flexibility there. And we can look at wait times, costs for the rider, walk distance requirements, alternative public transit options. So the neat thing about this technology is that it is flexible. So we've got a great team at VIA. It's always crunching the numbers for us, and so we're able to make adjustments fairly quickly when we see something arise. So that's an overview. You can pause for questions, or we can jump into the east expansion on the next page.
Any questions?
Okay.
All right.
So if we dig into the details related to our proposed expansion, the east zone is on par with the city's average thresholds of car-free and only one-car households. It over-indexes in population and poverty, and most notably, more than half of that zone's population is within the 200% of the poverty threshold. So some of those details are listed down below, where you can see population information, poverty rate, all that good stuff. The second thing that we considered was the existing fixed route transit coverage. So in this area, the coverage is very low. Route 25, the center point route, is the primary fixed route service for the zone, with headways that average about 45 minutes. Also in the east, we're able to connect into that East Transit Station. So if you call for a ride with VIA in that zone, you'll get dropped off at that East Transit Center where you can hop on the VX and be downtown in a very quick amount of time. And so really the bottom line is this, the poverty rate number is a strong indicator of need, and when you combine that with these other factors like the limited transit service, low car ownership, it's really the most logical place for us to expand. So if you guys want to look at the map, the very first map is the proposed zone, and you can see that we went through and listed out the 19 neighborhoods that it will be covering, and you can get an idea for kind of what the footprint looks like. East Transit Station is down there at the bottom, and so that is what our proposal looks like for the expansion zone. And then if you look at the next map, it gives you an idea of how both zones encompass the different districts, and how we're hitting those districts and adding coverage there. So the next two maps really just speak to neighborhoods that we're already covering in the downtown zone, and then there's a zoomed in version of the city center zone. So you guys, sometimes it's hard to see the actual streets on our map that's online. So I just thought I'd give you guys a more detailed map to look at. So.
Yeah, so I was really impressed with the demographic information that you guys were able to assemble. A few of the things that stood out to me are, for the proposed service area, 52% of the zone population is within 200,000%, or 200% of the poverty threshold, which translates to about $27,000 a year for a one-person household. And amongst other statistics are that there's 10% of that population that don't have a car, and another 39% that have access to one vehicle. 19 neighborhoods, as you mentioned, 14% of the city's population. And I did want to note, I think I had mentioned this to you last week, about that Route 25, the Centerpoint route. I was able to go back and look at the BJCTA in the past has provided a transit scorecard, and based on that information, which is kind of dated now, but the Centerpoint route was actually the third highest. So at the time, summer of 2021, it was running about almost 9,000 riders on an annual basis. So this is going to be hopefully a good supplement to that. I do want to just mention really that as it's currently designed or currently set up, Birmingham On Demand is separate from the Transit Authority's operations, and so if a user would want to take advantage of Birmingham On Demand, that's $1.50 per ride. Then if they, in this case, used it to connect to the Woodlawn BRT station, they could plug into the MAX system, and for another $1.50 for your just regular user, get in that system, and they would be, if they needed to transfer to another route, they could transfer. They could get a transfer. So, I'm thinking about the design of the system, and it has to make sense. And at the same time, as I mentioned previously, we don't want to do anything that would hurt the existing transit infrastructure. So just in terms of incentives, if a rider wanted to use the number 25 bus, they would pay that $1.50, and go into Central Station, or for twice as much, $3, they could use Birmingham On Demand, go to the BRT station in Woodlawn, and make that connection to access the rest of the public transportation system. So I think that makes sense. I do think that, as we launch this, we'll have to keep an eye on those Route 25 numbers, ridership numbers, and potentially, make some adjustments depending on,
Absolutely.
what choices riders are going to be making.
That's definitely our plan, to keep a close eye on ridership numbers and then, all the other details related to time of day, when people are using the service, so we can continue to make the right, decisions related to rate structure and just to monitor this zone in general, to see, how our ridership is looking. Because this is the first time as you guys know, have moved to an area of town that is, the population density is more spread out, so it's not, like the same as it is in the city center. And so I'm really interested to see how it does, because this is a lot of single-family home neighborhoods, and so it'll be interesting to see those numbers.
Well, I know Councilor Woods can provide some insight, but just from the City Council District 5 perspective, we have 7 public housing sites in the district, and 4 of them are going to be covered in this new service area. So Tom Brown, I think Kingston's in there, Morton Simpson, well, anyway, the ones that are in District 5 are in this service area are Tom Brown, Marks Village, Harris Homes, and Marks Freedom Manor. Anyway. Nevertheless, there are a bunch of transit-dependent riders that live in these public housing communities, and we have one individual in particular who lives in the Harris Homes community, who called us the other day and was just trying to get home from Walmart in Eastwood, and I think it took her 4 hours. Yeah, something like that. So
that's tough.
Yeah. So this could literally be life-changing for some folks who are in that situation. 3 or 4 hours is a big part of the day for transit. For a travel time that, if you had your own vehicle, would take about 10 or 15 minutes at the most. So I guess the other thing that we'll need to monitor is wait times. So this is an on-demand service. So people make a phone call or use a smartphone to hail a ride, And in the current service area, that wait time has been averaging about 8 minutes.
That's right.
So with the deployment of a new service area, that's one of the KPIs that we'll want to monitor closely.
Absolutely.
How many vehicles are we thinking that would be required to operate this area?
We're thinking 5 to 6 vehicles, and we'll keep 7 or 8 downtown.
Councilors, do you guys have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One, definitely excited to see East be inclusive of District 1 this go around. So thank you for kind of hearing that feedback from residents and including. And I think it's really important to have, like, you've got grocery stores, Walmart, things like that in that footprint, and they can also connect to the BRT, which is, connects you to pretty much all the transit Birmingham has to offer. And so I think that's pretty key. Excited about that. So definitely excited to kind of see what the stats that come off this and be able to kind of compare them to the early days of our current footprint and just kind of see what that looks like. But like I said, I think this can be pretty impactful having a hospital in that footprint as well. And so you're creating a system, because even there really hasn't been a transit system that kind of is accessible to everybody, because it is so spread out.
That's
and
right.
So, like, even if you still have to, a lot of people have to go a ways to get to a bus stop if they want to try to take advantage of that. So I'm excited about this. I think this, like I said, I'm a data guy. I'm just excited to kind of see the data that comes off of.
We'll definitely come back to you guys, maybe after about a month of service and report back in with numbers.
Okay, and you said that was going to be 5 or 7 or so vehicles?
Yes, 5 to 7 vehicles, depending on.
Okay.
You know what I said? 5 or 6. I can't. 5 to 7.
I already wrote down 7.
Okay, write down 7.
But no, I think this is really cool. I know a lot of people on the eastern side are going to be happy to kind of see this and be able to pull data from it, so we can really give us a bigger footprint of the city as a whole to kind of see, where the demand is overall. And so excited to see that. And I still think there's opportunity to create a tiered system and things like that to be able to go further to maybe even offset some of the cost of stretching it further. So, but no, excited to see this.
Great.
Thank you for getting back to us in October, like you said. You said late October.
Can you believe it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed like a few of the neighborhoods that are in District 9, like East Thomas, and I know that I haven't had the privilege of knowing about the on-demand until, being elected. Like, what type of feedback have you gotten off that western quadrant of town, like Ansley, Pratt City? I don't even know if transit, service that area.
Feedback related to wanting this service?
Yeah, if someone needs a ride, because I don't know. Again, I see bus stop terminals in the area, but I'm not sure if transit truly service, those areas like Pratt and Ansley, those areas. So that may be something. I see some of the transit team is here today, may be able to answer, that question around, is transit servicing the western quadrant of town?
It is more substantial on the western side of town as it is on the east. I don't have specific details of the routes, but can certainly get you that information.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that DJCTA is also endeavoring to create on-demand microtransit as well, and so there's definitely a collaboration in moving this forward. So,
Absolutely. And we'll have more news from them in the next few weeks, so.
okay. All right, so I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox here for a second.
Okay.
Promise I won't belabor this point, but so when we started this, Birmingham On Demand, there was definitely a conversation with a lot of stakeholders, and we made a point of going to some of our larger employers to discuss this. And well, long story short, I've since had some conversations that were concerning to me, because you have definitely gotten the full force of the council's demand for an expansion. Is that
right.
Accurate? You say that?
I would agree.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So people want this, and however, I was told recently that employers. Well, let me back up a second. So when we initiated this conversation about starting a on-demand microtransit system in the city of Birmingham, we went to those large employers and said, hey, this is something that could be really great for the city of Birmingham and also help you. So, however, I've since been told that employers don't necessarily see the benefit of assisting in expansion, that they are of the opinion that public transportation is a public sector activity, and it's not really to their benefit to help support it. I beg to differ, and I personally believe that the private sector could accelerate development of this type of system, and it definitely would be to their benefit to do so. I'm going to pick on UAB for a second here. The largest employer in the state of Alabama, as far as I know, based on latest statistics. There are a lot of those employees live within the city of Birmingham. There's a lot of folks who particularly live on the south side, which is not covered in any of this area. And yet, UAB's master plan, calls for the construction of additional parking facilities at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars. About $160 million specifically in prices that were estimated 2 or 3 years ago. So again, a little bit of a soapbox here. I want to just say, I would encourage the private sector to be in this game. And I hope you all would do the same, that there's no reason that the city of Birmingham, has to, we could take the lead, but we don't have to bear the full weight of supporting this. And parking is not free. Parking is not free. It is never free. It is, either you're paying for it directly or somebody is subsidizing it. So that, ends up, in a lot of cases, affecting, employers' ability to do things, and in short, again, it shouldn't be solely on the shoulders of the public sector to support better transportation options. We would welcome private sector involvement in helping to build robust transportation options in the city of Birmingham.
Department of Transportation wholeheartedly agrees.
All right.
Yeah, just speaking on that, parking is definitely not free. I did use the Park mobile app last week for the first time, and that was a great experience. But yeah, I do think finding more ways to expand space for people to participate in our transit. Like, I'm a big fan of the park and ride type systems where we can shorten, I guess, the footprint that like transit actually has to operate in. If you can get to these main hubs like our BRT hubs, and we can build more and more branch lines after that. But yeah, I definitely think like looking around and seeing who are the other stakeholders who should be at the table that maybe aren't at the table, and inviting them to pull up a chair. So I agree. Also, everybody use Park Mobile, because parking is not free. So.
And I agree, with Councilor Quinn and Councilor Woods, because what happens is you put people in situations where they don't pay the parking fine, they find themselves in court, trying to pay a fine. If you don't pay the fine, then you get charged with failing to appear in court, and then we still criminalizing people. I think when we were talking in a transportation meeting, like once, that they had all these outstanding fines, in parking fees, and trying to figure out a way to collect. So if, just like they're saying, if we could get more people at the table and kind of see what we can do to curb this problem, because everybody's not as fortunate as everybody. Like I got 3 cars. I got a car with 400,000 miles on it that I still pounce around in, and 2 up-to-date cars. But for those who don't, have cars, and then when you go somewhere, like now, even like Council Wood say, when I pull up on a public street, I use the Park Mobile, because I don't want the city putting a traffic fine on my car. Like that happened to me with the parking authority. This parking authority that's here putting $60 fines on people's cars. That's ridiculous. Like, who's gonna pay somebody $60 for a parking ticket? So, I'm in wholeheartedly, everybody needs to play their part, in providing ways for people to transport, especially the people that's less fortunate than those of us who can get around and move around.
It's true. Not having access to a car should not limit you in the ways that it does currently in our city.
So just in terms of money, what we've allocated currently in this fiscal year for the Birmingham on-demand system is $2.2 million. Is that
That's
correct?
Right.
So what's being proposed wouldn't require any additional funding. It's all within that budget.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And do you need the committee to take any action, or is this more of just an informational proposal?
I don't know. Information.
All right.
It's the official line.
Well, we're very happy to receive it.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm happy to review it with you guys. And we'll be
Okay.
excited to come back and share, which I know will be a success story once we launch. And would love for you guys to help us, talk to your constituents and see how they're liking it. We love to hear feedback, not just number feedback, but
Yeah.
anecdotal.
And just as a correction to what I said earlier, so I can never remember the new name of the old Morton Simpson / Kingston, but Tom Brown and is literally across the street from a Birmingham Express stop. so they're already plugged into that system.
Great.
So, all right.
One more
we-
comment.
Sure.
Yes?
Thank you. And again, I'm James Fowler. I serve as the director of the city's Department of Transportation. So I wanted to make a comment just looking ahead, kind of big picture of where this fits in, because I think that's important, and it maybe lines up what we're going to talk about later with transit-oriented development. So the cost per ride of providing a ride-share ride, so microtransit, is always going to be more expensive than providing a fixed route transit ride, because a fixed route transit ride is a bigger vehicle, and so if we get people on those bigger vehicles, then the cost of that gets distributed more broadly. So it's always going to be more expensive to provide that on-demand service fixed route ride. And so it should be a goal of ours to grow in such a way that we can make it as easy as possible for as much of our population as possible to get onto a fixed route service and for us to provide high quality fixed route service. If we grow in such a way that we have over the last century, where we spread everyone out into single family homes and so that we limit their options for mobility, that will be much more expensive for our city as a whole, not just for transportation providing a transit service, but for all the infrastructure that we maintain, including the roadways, the storm sewers, the paving, the lighting, the sidewalks, all of that infrastructure. And so building in a manner where the majority of our property is single-family homes drastically affects our maintenance liability. And nationally, all of our cities are struggling with their maintenance liabilities. Even wealthy cities are struggling with their maintenance liabilities. We are not a wealthy city, as we know. And so for a lot of reasons, including access to jobs, access to healthcare, access to services, we should grow differently than we have in the past. And so a goal with respect to this conversation should be to grow in such a way that we can give as much of our population as possible high quality access to fixed route transit service. And so this is a good tool based on how we have grown, and it's hopefully a good gap filler and supplement, but it'll be more expensive if we continue to lean on this tool and not change how we grow. So I just want to make that point.
Right. I'd say the service area expansion, a lot of that area is that single-family residential type development. So, but that is a fantastic lead-in into the conversation that we're going to have later about transit-oriented development. So, couldn't have done it better myself. So, are we ready to move on to the next item?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, as some folks may know, the company formerly known as Gotcha has ceased doing business in the city of Birmingham, and now we have a new vendor application, which this will need a vote from the committee.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think you guys have all looked at the Lime application. There's a lot of information in here. I'll just pull out a few highlights for you guys. One thing I'm really excited about is their e-bike they're going to be bringing to the market. I actually got to ride it a few weeks ago. It is the premium cream of the crop e-bike. So I think we're going to have a lot of people really excited about that option. Yeah, because not everybody's a scooter rider, right? So their fleet will consist of the e-bikes and then their the scooter, which they've actually updated the scooter that from the packet that they're going to be bringing in, but it's the most up to date. It's the ES200 scooter, and it's got all the bells and whistles, lights, a bell. I think it has. I was thinking it had. Never mind. So Lime has already secured a temporary warehouse, but they are to get launched with, and then they're going to be securing a more permanent location at Oxmoor Circle. So they are ready to go. So so in addition to a senior operations manager, they'll have mechanics here. They also have staff that they call juicers, which is pretty clever. Juicers, they're in addition to the full-time locally hired staff, and they're members of the community who in effect service the scooters and make money doing that. So it's just kind of it's a nice little supplemental part-time gig for local folks. Thought that was a interesting way to do business. And I guess I'll just let you guys ask me questions. They're committed to coming into the market and providing a high level of service, a sophisticated app, and yeah, can hit the ground running.
Yeah, so one of the things that jumps out at me in their application, so when we developed this ordinance, it was really important to us that we require that vendors have some sort of equity plan. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that jumped out to me in their application was their zone-based pricing. And so they have identified areas where regardless of whether or not riders are enrolled in their equity program, which they call Lime Access, riders in those zones will receive a 25% discount. So that's good to see. In a larger scope, I think one of the biggest pushbacks that, and the most frequent comments that we've received from the community about shared micromobility devices is the rebalancing and basically, what people complain about is the, scooters and bikes being humped over, laying on their side and the sidewalk and other things, and folks use these things to get all over the place, and so we've had scooters in Redmont, which how they make it up the hill, I don't know, but anyway, but then the scooter will be there for days, and so are we trying to address that,
Yes. I mean, it's an ongoing kind of conversation that we have with our vendors, and what I've determined is that even though we do have our I forget what the window is that we've required them to pick things up by, it's just
72 hours, I believe.
72 hours. There are times where that's just not going to be possible. So, but my experience has been is anytime we get that feedback, they are very responsive to going out and taking care of the issue. We're never going to be 100% with that. So.
Does Lime, I think some of the vendors have like QR codes on their devices that folks can scan and report that device needs to be attended to. Does Lime have that functionality?
I think they do. Let me look real quick here.
Well,
I know you can take a picture and you could submit it on their app.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you automatically scan it if it does something.
Well, I'll just make the point that I think that's an issue that we need to continue engaging our vendors on, and because that's where we're getting the pushback from the community. So.
Well, and I think we made an initial push of I think we're about 75 parking corrals that are in and around the city, and it's really time for us to go out and to add some additional parking corrals. So I'm actually working on that with VO right now. Their local operations manager knows the market really well, and so they're going to come back to me with a list of proposed new parking corrals. So, because a lot of times it's a convenience thing, because I have definitely done this where I guess I'm going to admit to not parking in a corral all the time, but if I'm in a hurry going to a meeting, for me to walk around the block and park a scooter, it's not always convenient, so I'll just put it out of the way. But I think we the city can help with some of these issues by getting out there and putting in some more corrals. So, and we're able to do that now that the World Games are gone. So.
Yeah. And there is a built-in incentive in the pricing structure for people to return them to the corrals,
That's right?
It's like a couple of dollars off of the ride, or
I think it's $2 VO.
Yeah.
So VO is actually prepared, this is unrelated to Lime, prepared report on their service from the time they started to date. And so in 2 weeks, we're going to go over those numbers. So I think you guys will find that intriguing on, just how the service has increased, and then some of the stats related to where people are parking and where people are going and that kind of thing. So
you said that the info is coming from VO, or?
Yes, they put together a report that I'm reviewing, and then we'll review it with you guys in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
So if the committee takes action on this today, when do you anticipate it coming before the council?
It has, I guess it could happen next week. Is Chief Mitchell still here? I am not aware if it needs to go to Budget and Finance.
Okay.
As well.
I wouldn't think so, because there's no money involved.
Right.
But I do think that it might be helpful to have some, idea of utilization, and just to
how so?
So just having some idea of what the market demand is, and right now we only have one vendor to be able to supply that information to us, but I think that's helpful, or
Sure.
at least gives us more information.
So your thought is making sure that we are bringing a service that the market has room for.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Ultimately, the vendor is seeking to come into this market, so I'm sure they've done their homework and wouldn't be, wanting to come into a market if they didn't think that they could make money.
That's right.
But for the folks out there who don't use shared micromobility, having, some impression of, how many users there are out there, might help keep this in context. For example, to the folks who complain about, the devices not being in the corrals or parked properly. If they're not a user, then, I've literally had people tell me, they don't see the value in it at all. They see it, a very small number of folks see it as an annoyance. So, knowing, having some idea about how this is helping folks, helps keep it in context.
Sure.
So.
I can put together a little brief that goes along with Lime's application for council.
Okay. All right.
And you may not know, but I would ask, how do you capture that, I guess, the usage based on need or benefit versus
So
fun?
if it's to ride a bike or a scooter to go to the grocery store versus just a joyride around the neighborhood. That's a tough one. Obviously, we can look at the data based on the beginning and end destination, but there's just going to be a lot of ambiguity with other rides that are taking place in order to pinpoint, what kind of ride it is.
Maybe like frequency of the specific user, like if one person is using it consistently, probably your joyriders are probably going to be more so.
I'll see if they can
random.
drill down into specific user cases, so we could see how one person uses it to actually, depends on it for their primary source of transportation.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know. That's a hard one to capture, but I'm sure you could do it by November, since you got October checked.
We'll see what I can come up with.
I will say, it surprised me to see where, some of these devices were being used, like places that I really didn't expect them to be, deep in Gate City. And it tends to be younger folks. And so I think it's awesome, that people have another transportation option. Certainly, renting a scooter for a few minutes is a lot cheaper than, owning your own vehicle. So, in any case, would the committee like to recommend this application to the council for approval?
I move we recommend Lime to the full council.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
To my knowledge, we don't have any old or new business. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move adjournment.
Second.
Thank you, committee adjourned. And for the folks who are here for